Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. What happened to me over the past 8 months still feels surreal, and I wanted to share my story as a reminder that sometimes standing your ground is the only way forward. My family's farm has been our legacy for 3 generations. 50 acres of the most beautiful land you'll ever see, nestled between rolling hills with a creek running through the eastern edge. My grandfather purchased this land back in 1947 after returning from the war, and it's been in our family ever since. I took over operations about 12 years ago when my father's arthritis got too bad for him to manage the daily work. There's a massive oak tree near the western boundary that my grandfather planted when my father was born. That tree has witnessed every significant moment in our family's history. I've spent countless hours beneath its branches, planning crop rotations or just taking a moment to reconnect with my roots. Every inch of this land tells a story. The southern field where my grandmother taught me to identify edible wild plants. The small apple orchard my father and I planted together when I was 10. This farm isn't just land. It's my heritage. When the property next to mine went up for sale last year, I wasn't particularly concerned. The previous owners had been an elderly couple who kept to themselves but were always pleasant. We'd exchange waves when our paths crossed, and occasionally they'd buy fresh produce from me. I was curious about who would move in but figured any reasonable person would respect the property boundaries that had been established for decades. Enter the new neighbors. I first met them when they were doing their final walkthrough of the property before closing. I brought over a basket of fresh vegetables for my early spring harvest and introduced myself. They seemed polite enough, if a bit standoffish. They mentioned they were from the city, about 3 hours away, and had bought the place as a weekend retreat. "This is a really nice gesture," the husband said, examining the basket like he'd never seen a homegrown tomato before. "We don't really cook much, though." His wife quickly added, "But we're excited to be part of the community. We love how quaint everything is out here." Something about the way she said quaint made me feel like I was being patted on the head, but I brushed it off. Not everyone understands rural life, and I figured they'd either adapt or keep to themselves. For the first few months, things were fine. They came out mostly on weekends, made some cosmetic improvements to their house, and generally kept to themselves. We'd exchange pleasantries when we ran into each other, but they never seemed interested in more than surface-level conversation. In early June, I had to travel to a regional agricultural conference that I attend every year. It's a 3-day event that I find invaluable for keeping up with new farming techniques and connecting with other farmers. This year, it was followed by a short visit to my aunt who was recovering from surgery, so I ended up being away for just over a week. When I returned home, something immediately felt off as I drove up my long driveway. I couldn't quite put my finger on it until I reached the house and looked toward the western property line. Where there had previously been an unobstructed view of sunset over my fields, there now stood a massive structure that definitely hadn't been there when I left. My neighbors had built a garage, a very large, very expensive-looking garage, and from what I could tell from my vantage point, part of it was clearly on my property. I spent the rest of that evening unpacking and trying to calm down. Maybe it was just an optical illusion from this angle. Maybe they had surveyed properly and it just looked like it was encroaching. I decided to investigate properly in the morning rather than marching over there half-cocked. The next day confirmed my worst fears. Not only had they built a substantial structure partially on my land, but they'd also altered the natural drainage slope, creating what would become a serious water runoff problem once the rainy season hit. The garage extended about 12 feet onto my property, taking up nearly 400 square feet of my land. What made it worse was that this particular section was where I had planned to expand my berry patch the following spring. The soil there is perfect for it, and I had already started preparing the area last fall. Not to mention, the garage now completely blocked the view of the sunset from my favorite spot on the porch, the spot where my parents used to sit together every evening in their final years. I pulled out the property survey that had been conducted just 3 years prior when I refinanced my mortgage. There was no ambiguity here. They were building on my land, plain and simple. I walked over to their house, survey in hand, and knocked on the door. No answer. I tried again the next day, and the day after, but it seemed they weren't coming out that week. Finally, the following weekend, I saw their car pull in and went over immediately. "Oh, hey there," the husband said when he answered the door. "Something wrong with the vegetables?" "No," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "I wanted to talk to you about the new garage you've built." His expression changed immediately. "Isn't it great? Top of the line. We can finally bring our cars out here without worrying about them getting dirty." "There's a problem," I said. "According to my property survey, your garage extends about 12 feet onto my land. I've brought the documentation to show you." I held out the survey, but neither of them made a move to take it. The wife laughed lightly. "Oh, that can't be right. We had our contractor check everything." Did you have a survey done? I asked. They exchanged glances. Well, no, the husband admitted, but we used the fence line as reference, and our architect assured us it would be fine. I pointed out that the old fence line hadn't been maintained in decades and had shifted over time. It had never been the actual property line. Look, the husband said, his tone becoming dismissive, even if what you're saying is true, it's just a few feet of unused land. Your place is 50 acres, right? You can't possibly need every square inch. That's not the point, I replied. It's my property, and you built on it without permission. Beyond that, you've created a water runoff issue that's going to affect my crops. The wife sighed dramatically. If anything, we've improved things. That section was just overgrown weeds. Our garage actually makes your property look better by association. I felt my face growing hot but maintained my composure. I need you to understand that this is a serious issue. The garage needs to be moved back to your property line. That's ridiculous, the husband scoffed. Do you have any idea how much this garage cost us? We're not moving it over a few feet of worthless land. It's not worthless to me, I insisted. It's my property, and I have plans for that area. Fine, he said, clearly annoyed. If it means that much to you, we'll buy that strip of land from you. How about $500? That's more than generous for unusable farmland. I was stunned by their attitude. It's not for sale, I said firmly, and I expect you to address this issue promptly. Oh, come on, the wife interjected. Don't be difficult. You should be thanking us. That eyesore of a farm could use some modern touches. We're actually increasing your property value. I left shortly after that, realizing that reasonable discussion wasn't going to get me anywhere. As I walked back to my house, I heard the husband call out, "Think about our offer. $500 for land you'll never use anyway." The next day, I called a local surveyor to get an official assessment. When he confirmed what I already knew, I contacted a lawyer who specialized in property disputes. He advised me to document everything and said we should also check if they had obtained the proper building permits. As it turned out, they hadn't bothered with permits either. The county building department had no record of any application or approval for a structure of that size. Meanwhile, my neighbors had started using the garage regularly, filling it with expensive equipment and what looked like a vintage car collection. My lawyer helped me file a formal complaint with encroachment. Throughout this process, I discovered something interesting while going through some old family records. The western boundary of our property wasn't just any arbitrary line. It followed the watershed divide that impacted water flow to the creek running through several neighboring properties. This fact would prove significant later on. When my neighbors received the legal notice, they attempted to settle. Their offer increased to $2,000 for the land, which was still insulting considering what they had done. When I refused, they switched tactics. Suddenly, they were everywhere in the community. They donated to the local school. They attended town meetings. They hosted a barbecue for the volunteer fire department. And everywhere they went, they told their version of events. They were being harassed by the stubborn farmer next door who was making unreasonable demands over an insignificant boundary dispute. Some people actually bought their story. I started getting sideways glances at the feed store. A few acquaintances became noticeably cooler toward me. It stung, but I knew I was in the right. The situation came to a head at a town meeting where water conservation was being discussed. The topic of the creek came up, and that's when I spoke up. I explained calmly how the new garage had altered the natural drainage patterns, causing runoff that was carrying chemical contaminants from their driveway sealant and car fluids directly into the watershed. I had water samples and documentation from an environmental engineer to back up my claims. This isn't just about my property line, I explained to the room. This is about protecting the water that all of us depend on. That garage was built without permits, without a survey, and without any consideration for the environmental impact it would have on our entire community. Several other farmers who relied on that same water system for irrigation immediately understood the implications. By the end of the meeting, the tide of public opinion had shifted. The following week, the county building inspector came out and officially cited my neighbors for multiple code violations. The court date finally arrived 6 months after I discovered the encroachment. I was nervous but prepared. My lawyer had gathered all the necessary documentation, including historical records showing the importance of the watershed boundary, environmental impact reports, and testimony from agricultural experts about the potential crop damage. What we weren't prepared for was what came out during the hearing. The contractor who built the garage was called to testify, and under oath, he revealed that he had actually warned my neighbors about the potential boundary issue. He had suggested they get a proper survey done, but they had dismissed his concerns, saying they were in a hurry to complete the project while the farmer was away. The judge was not amused. Not only did he order the complete removal of the garage, But he also required my neighbors to restore the land to its original condition according to specifications provided by an environmental engineer. They were ordered to pay for all crop losses I could demonstrate were caused by their actions, plus my legal fees. The total came to just over $42,000. Property rights are fundamental, the judge said in his ruling. When we choose to ignore them for our own convenience, we undermine the very foundation of our community. This court finds the defendants' actions showed a blatant disregard not just for their neighbors' rights, but for county regulations and environmental protections that exist to benefit everyone. My neighbors were furious. They refused to look at me as they left the courthouse. The garage was demolished 3 weeks later under county supervision. The environmental remediation took another month to complete. Throughout the process, I occasionally saw them watching from their house, but they never approached me or acknowledged my presence. 2 months after the remediation was completed, a for sale sign appeared on their property. They couldn't face the community after what had happened, especially once word got out about how they had knowingly built on my land and then tried to turn the town against me. I used part of the settlement money to establish a conservation easement along that property line, ensuring it could never be developed in the future. On the spot where their garage had stood, I planted a young oak tree, a descendant of my grandfather's original tree grown from one of its acorns. In a way, their actions had pushed me to better protect my land for future generations, something I might not have thought to do otherwise. Last fall, during the Harvest Festival, several neighbors approached me to express their respect for how I had handled the situation. One elderly farmer, who rarely speaks to anyone, shook my hand firmly. "You did right," he said simply. "Sometimes standing your ground isn't just for you. It's for all of us." The new owners of the neighboring property are a young couple who actually have farming experience. Before they made any changes to their property, they came over with their own survey and asked me to walk the boundaries with them. We've since become friends, sharing equipment and knowledge. Every evening, I can once again watch the sunset from my porch, with an unobstructed view across my fields. The young oak is growing steadily, a reminder that some things are worth fighting for. My grandfather used to say that land doesn't really belong to us. We belong to it, and our job is to protect it for those who come after. I think he would be proud of how this all turned out. Sometimes I reflect on what might have happened if I had simply accepted their offer and let them keep their garage on my land. It would certainly have been easier in the short term. But boundaries matter. Not just the physical ones that define our properties, but the personal ones that define our principles. By defending my land, I was defending something much more important: the idea that we should respect each other and the rules that keep our community functioning. The farm feels more precious to me now than ever before. Not because I won some battle, but because I was reminded of why this land matters so much in the first place. It's not just soil and trees and crops. It's a trust, passed down through generations, that I'm now more determined than ever to honor. The next one is entitled People Story. I don't know if this goes here. I just needed to get it out. I confronted them today and I can't stop crying or shaking. I don't know why. I don't know what's wrong with me right now. I'm finally calming down a little to get this done. So I, 36 male, got into some trouble 15 years ago. I take all the responsibility for this, and even to this day I carry all the shame, guilt and embarrassment for it. Also, this might come up. This is not cultural or religion. It's just shame to the family name. The situation when I was 19, my ID was stolen and being used in another state and created a situation where my driver's license was suspended nationwide. Somehow any and all notifications from the other state never made it to me. I started doing all the necessary things I needed to do to try and fix the problem. I, however, had a couple of tickets in my current state that I needed to pay but couldn't because I needed to pay my rent and keep my apartment. Also at the time my full-time job was having problems and was borderline shutting down, so to try and make ends meet I was doing a lot of freelance work as well. Again, my fault. I knew the company was in trouble, but I was still holding out hope that things would get better. I was hoping that a couple more freelance jobs and I would be able to finally pay the tickets. This was never the case, and the long story short of it, I was arrested and spent 2 weeks in jail. Not ideal, but I guess in the long run it worked out for the best by clearing the tickets in my home state. However, my family felt otherwise and I was completely disowned because of this. I lost everything and everyone. The only reason I still had my apartment was because I had enough to cover the rent and the freelance work kept up. It took another 6 months, but I was finally able to get the other state to release my driver's license. I decided that since my family hated me I didn't need them, so a year later I changed my last name, phone number and email. My social media is locked down so tight you would think I was hiding national security secrets. I was able to finish college and get settled into my career, and at this point I'm happier than I have ever been. Enter current time, and 2 weeks ago there was a knock on my door and it was my mom and dad. Again, it had been 15 years and I hadn't spoken to them, not one word. The only thing I could get out of my mouth was, "How did you find me and what are you doing here?" My mom's response was $5 grand to a PI. Finally, a search of Facebook with just your first name found you and the PI confirmed it was you. I responded. You didn't answer my second question. What are you doing here? My mom again. It's been 15 years. Looking at where you are, it seems you have learned your lesson and you are succeeding. You've missed out on a lot of things. I ended with, yes, I have learned my lesson. One of them is don't think anyone will ever help you or be understanding. Even your family. And yes, I did succeed. And I did it entirely without you. Please leave and don't ever come back. Shut the door in their face, locked it, checked the back door and closed all the curtains. I'm guessing they hung around for another 15 minutes knocking demanding to be let in. I went back to bed, turned the fan on high and went back to sleep. I did some research. And I have missed out on a lot. I have nieces and nephews, brothers and sisters-in-laws. But the truth is, I don't know any of them and I don't think I need to. I live a very quiet life. I can count on two hands how many friends I actually have. A friend said I may have taken it too far. That I should have given them a chance and if I didn't like what they had to say then I could have told them to go away. I was hoping that this was going to be the end of it. But not they have taken to stalking me. I'll be completely honest. They are harmless, but just a real pain in the ass and also I have been ducking with them and having some fun with the help of a friend. He now calls them fleas and will check on me asking if I have fleas or not. It's kind of funny. If I say yes then it's game on. The first night he came over and we walked downtown to a really expensive restaurant that I knew they were never going to go to. Another night we went to the porn store. That was the best one. This past week the way my days off fell I had a 5-day stretch so I decided to go to the city for a few days. I'm walking distance to the Amtrak station and they followed me. I kept my AirPods in the whole time and I know they were trying to talk to me. But I ignored the entire time. People on the platform even were telling me that they were talking to me and I said that I know but I don't want to deal with them. The train came and I got on and left them to watch. I loved it. It got to the point I finally had to acknowledge them. They weren't going to go away so we met at the park across from my apartment. I didn't hold anything back. I told them this was the one and only time I was going to talk to them. I took a page from the Matlock series and told them I was their judge. I was their jury. Thank you, Olympia Lawrence. I then told them that as far as I was concerned they were guilty of anything and everything and all I was doing was hearing what they had to say before I walked away from them. I asked them that why now after 15 years they are demanding to be back in my life and why they made the decisions they did to disown me. They told me that I ruined the family name and that the shame I brought to the family was horrible and that this was the only way to make it right was to get rid of me. They said that recently my name has been coming up in conversation and that the family has grown with a lot of new people. That brother and sister-in-law are asking questions about who is Brinley. That I have a niece who they think I would love and get along with and the same for a nephew who was born last year and now should be the time to fix things. They said that looking at my apartment and the life I had that I must have learned my lesson about being a better person and managing my life better. I finally cut them off and told them that I couldn't stand to hear anymore. I was at the point I could hear my heart beating in my ears. I told them that I did everything completely by myself. Nobody from that life exists anymore. Not one person. That they just need to tell everyone the truth that I was in jail for 2 weeks and because of this the decision was made to get rid of me. I told them that I did it all on my own and that my one cousin Jean who is only a cousin by marriage was the one who was there for me hence why I took her last name. I told them that to this day I'm doing everything on my own and rely on nobody and don't need or want them in any way of my life. They made their decisions and I'm making mine. I told them this will be the last time we talk and that I would be going to see a lawyer to see if there was anything that could be done to keep them away from me, and that if they continue to follow me around or show up at my apartment I would have them arrested for trespassing. And I went back home and again locked everything down, pulled the curtains and have been crying since. The next one is entitled People Story. I met David about 6 months ago. I met him through friends and we clicked and became good friends pretty fast. One night, when we were drinking we began talking about the past. He told me he had been admitted to a psych hospital a couple of years and then told me he had killed a friend in a psychotic break and had been all over news media. His story were all over the place when it happened so I recognized him when he told me, I just hadn't made the connection. His sentence was to undergo psychiatric treatment and he's on medication now and really regret doing it. He tells me it was like a dream. And he remember it as such. He was also on a lot of drugs at the time. He's completely different now and I trust him. He's the sweetest guy I've ever met. And to be honest I can't connect him to that person who were all over the media. Well, we started dating a month ago. And I brought him home to meet my mother yesterday and she recognized him. She didn't say anything to his face, but called me today. She was completely freaking out and telling me I can't date a murderer. I told her what I've told you. He was psychotic. He's not the same person who did that, and he's heavily medicated with no intentions of stopping. But she was just completely freaking out, telling me she feared for my safety and she wouldn't have anything to do with him and I had to leave him immediately. I told her that wasn't going to happen and she said that as long as I'm dating him she doesn't want to see me and he's ultimately going to kill me. I understand completely she's fearful and anxious about the situation, but I still think she's overreacting. It wasn't a deliberate murder, and it honestly annoys me to no end that she thinks that I'm not able to judge his character. So yeah, how do I get my mom to accept this situation? Am I just doomed to not see her again? Could really use some input. Update: thanks for the responses in the last thread. A lot of people told me things I didn't want to hear, like I couldn't judge a person after knowing him for 6 months, which I still kinda think you can, just not as much as I hoped. I guess some people expect something crazy to have happened, but nothing really has. He just weren't as empathetic as I thought. I realized pretty quickly that if I didn't call him first, he wouldn't call me for days. And when I told him I had a very unpleasant encounter with a guy, he just laughed and told me that if it were him, he would be happy to get the attention. And I just couldn't get over that he killed a guy, honestly. When I was laying in bed and he was doing something else, I couldn't stop thinking about how vulnerable I was. I didn't feel safe. So I broke up with him. I still think he deserves happiness, and to move on from what he did. But I'm not the one for him and I can't help him. My mom was very relieved when I told her we broke up. I didn't tell her why, just that it didn't work out, and although she didn't cut me out of her life like she threatened, she's been a lot warmer towards me since. About the breakup, he actually took it so well that I don't think he was ever really in love with me. It was basically me breaking up and him saying, "You gotta do what's best for you. So I wish you good luck." I'm kinda heartbroken that I apparently didn't mean that much to him, but I'm still fine. We still talk though, which is probably stupid, but he's a fun guy to talk to, and I don't feel like I can judge him for doing something while on a psychotic breakdown. Also, as I stated in the last thread, he has no intentions of stopping with his medication. He knows he needs it for the rest of his life, and as long as he follows that, he'll probably continue to be in my life. The next one is entitled People Story. I'm using a throwaway because mutual friends use Reddit. Sorry for the length. My ex-boyfriend is James. James and I dated for 3 years between spring 2014 and the end of winter 2017. Since my daughter is obviously older than 3, it's clear that she is not biologically James. Her father was not someone who wanted to be involved with her, and signed away all rights when she was born, so he is not involved in the picture. James and I were originally friends, which grew into a relationship when my daughter was around the age of 1. As my daughter grew a little bit older, she saw James as a de facto parent, a role that he happily stepped up to. She knows that he isn't daddy, but had the strongest bond with him of anyone outside of the biological family. Our relationship finished owing to a difference in personal timelines. James wanted to buy a house together. We had lived together in the last year, but we each still had our own places, and moved to another city for work, while I was happy where I was located. It became a self-imposed ultimatum, and while James didn't actually move, it was clear that our relationship was over. We stayed friends, and he changed from de facto dad to fun Uncle James to my daughter. We have both made sure that she was stable about the situation, something that she clearly seems to be. As I do with other friends, my daughter and I will occasionally visit James, who sometimes has my daughter without me there for a couple of hours at a time if I have to run errands or something similar. I have no reason at all to worry about James with my daughter, who is always all smiles and 5 more minutes. When I get back, about 6 months ago James started dating Tracy. She is someone that he works with who I actually first met while we were dating. Their relationship itself isn't the issue. However, there have been instances that have caused concern in the past few months. The first was when James invited my daughter around for a playdate with James' nephew, who he was babysitting. Tracy was there too, which I expected. However, when we arrived and James greeted my daughter with a hug, she commented on how she looked like her daddy, meaning James. Both James and I said that my daughter wasn't James' child, which is something James later said had come up in conversation between them before. She only remarked that she meant they had a strong father-daughter bond, which I thought odd, but ignored. There have been a couple of other times when I have seen Tracy either out and about or at planned events when she has said that my daughter really likes spending time with James, which I obviously know, though I just took it as awkward exes chat. The reason I am posting is about what happened a couple of days ago. Again, James was babysitting his nephew, and had invited myself and my daughter to the park for an afternoon. We get there and everything is fine until my phone rings and I'm told that there's an emergency in the office that I have to sort out because X, Y, and Z aren't picking up their phone. I mention this, and James and Tracy offer to look after my daughter and stay in the park while I rush over to the office, only a 5-minute drive, to sort out the problem. I'm gone for about half an hour overall. The issue wasn't really an issue, as it never is, and when I get back everyone is where I left them and all happy. We start getting ready to go home when Tracy mentions to me that someone that she knew, an amateur photographer, happened to be in the park taking pictures of the landscape and had taken a couple of shots of the group, my daughter included, and that she'd send them over because they were apparently really sweet. I was a bit perturbed by someone apparently just coming over and photographing my child, but thought glass half full and decided it was only a nice gesture. A couple of hours later, Tracy sends me over the solo pictures of my daughter. She says that she didn't give her friend permission to use any of the solo pictures of my daughter on her professional page, but the ones of the scenery and of James' nephew were on there, and if I wanted to give consent then my daughters could be on there too. They were actually very cute, and I looked on the photographer's page to see the rest from the day. There were some sweet candids of the nephew, and some nice couples shots of James and Tracy, but the last picture on there was a family-style portrait of everyone, my daughter included. The caption said something like the James surname, Tracy's surname, know how to have fun. I immediately messaged the page asking for the picture to be taken down as it had my daughter in it without my permission. They replied apologizing for the issue, saying that Tracy had said that the little girl was James and he gave his consent. I then messaged James asking him to not give consent for anything involving my daughter, and to remind Tracy yet again that he is not my daughter's father. He replied saying he never gave his consent for any group pictures to be on there, and he resented the accusation. I messaged Tracy later on making it clear that I didn't want my daughter to be used in any kind of situation where the facts weren't clear, and no, James was not her father. I didn't get a reply. I don't know where to go from here. I don't want to be that ex-girlfriend who tries to get her ex to sneak around behind his girlfriend's back for him to see my daughter, but at the same time he's done nothing to stop Tracy from acting out this charade of my daughter being James and therefore hers. If I just cut them both out then my daughter will be confused, though I know she'll bounce back. I know that James will be hurt too, but I need to put mine and my daughter's feelings before that. It's just getting to me that we were able to be fine and stable through our whole breakup, yet a completely unavoidable situation is what will finish this off. Should I just move on without James and Tracy in my daughter's lives? Am I simply overreacting and becoming that ex regardless? Update: so I got a lot more interest in my post than I expected. While some were either end of the spectrum, the majority seemed to suggest that James was too involved in my daughter's life. I had a long think about why I had pursued this route. To clarify to some, I did not force James into this position. He was happy to maintain a relationship with my daughter given that he had been in her life for several years. The comments concerning where my daughter would be as and when James settled down and got married and had kids of his own also made me think. This situation was definitely one of convenience, especially given the fact that our relationship ended since James wanted to move away and I did not. I definitely had no plans to challenge any of James' life choices, nor did I ever expect him to prioritize myself and my daughter over anything else. Something I seemed not to convey clearly in my original post was that James really is just a friend and has been for the past year to me, and so because of that I don't use him for anything that a parent would do. On the he's not a babysitter/daycare posts especially, he sees her maybe once every 6 weeks, and since our relationship ended he's been alone with her 3 times at the most, so this is not me using our former relationship as a tool for free childcare. He asks to see my daughter, I don't make him make time for her. As a final clarifying point, this has never been a "I want him so you can't have him" situation. Our time together will always be cherished, but I do not want to pursue a romantic relationship with James again, and he doesn't with me. On to the update. After reading the comments to my post and thinking over the issues, I decided to send both James and Tracy messages apologizing for my reaction and my heat-of-the-moment accusations the day after I made the post. James responded saying that it was water under the bridge and he would have been annoyed too in the situation. Tracy's response was different. All she sent was a message saying I know he is, daughter's father. I assured her that James was not my child's dad, and even went as far as to apologize if I had seemed off with her or if my current relationship with James was an issue. She asked if we could meet up and talk, which I agreed to. We met for coffee, and she said that she had been off with me, but not because of my relationship with James. She said that last year she had found out that she was infertile, and while James knew and was supportive, seeing him with my little girl who she knew he helped raise for several years got to her, which resulted in comments about him as daddy. She then said that the whole photographer situation was set up. She had asked her friend who lived near to the park to come and take some pictures of her, James and the children as soon as it was clear that I was going to have to leave. She told James the same thing she told me about the friend happening to be in the park and wanting some portfolio shots, but told the friend out of James' earshot that I was totally fine with the pictures happening, and that James was my daughter's father so she has an on-site parent regardless. She was the one who suggested the family portrait shot. She told the friend to stick that one online but that the individual ones of my daughter needed to go through me first. She didn't think that I would be interested in looking at the other photos, and thought I wouldn't see it. She said that having a picture of her, her partner, a little boy and a little girl was enough to keep her going since her medical news was hitting her hard. Tracy ended by saying that since James is the only father that my daughter has ever known, she is therefore the closest thing that she will ever have to a child with him. I didn't quite know how to respond. After reading many comments on my post saying that I was a jealous harpy and that Tracy was an innocent bystander, or even calmer versions of that mindset, I was surprised that my actual suspicions were actually correct somewhat. This was not the reasoning I ever thought was behind this though. I thanked her for her honesty and asked if she was talking to anyone else about this. She said she wasn't, but she knew she should be. She also said that James knew nothing of the extent to which she was feeling, other than sometimes she was a little blue. We spent a while searching online for local mental health specialists, and left it with her promising to make an appointment and to talk to James. After getting home, I contacted James to say that I believed that there needed to be some distance established between him and my daughter to benefit everyone involved in the situation. He said he agreed, and that he would always be there for my daughter if she needed him. I asked my daughter that evening, more out of curiosity, as to how she views James, and all she said was James' nephew's uncle, so I'm taking that to mean that she is by no means dependent on him at the very least. I don't know if this is the end of this, and I'm sure I will get some criticism for not cutting out James altogether, or for even limiting the existing contact, but I believe this will benefit everyone, including Tracy, in the long run. Thank you again for everyone's advice. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.